Hawkins, Mr. Neil Hawkins. Neil is a highly successful leader in the education and voluntary sectors. He has record of setting high standards and facilitating transformative development in UK and international settings. His leadership, whether in education or the charitable sector, has led to institutional improvement and growth through sensitive implementation of strategic change and the management of diverse stakeholders. His roles as chair at Befrienders Worldwide of Touch to Talk and of Humanists UK highlight his expertise in governance, advisory and ethical. Very good leader. Please put your hands together. Sir, we are inviting you.
Thank you very much, and dignitaries, hosts, friends. It's so great to be here. Thank you for welcoming me, my wife, but also most importantly, just thank you for what you give as volunteers. I agree with everything that's been said here. I could just leave the stage now because I think everything that we've heard has been just extraordinary. But I was talking to Sachin and a little earlier today, and I've totally changed what I was going to say because we talked. I said to him, I think everyone has got a journey into suicide prevention, into supporting others, and he encouraged me to share mine. And I don't do this very often, but actually, if you'll forgive me, I will do that. It's not a happy story because these stories aren't happy stories, but I think what we do by sharing is kind of what we do when we befriend, isn't it? We're giving trust, and I think another side of befriending and of looking after those, or listening, isn't it? As we've said earlier, listening to those in need is a couplet that I learned not long ago from a inspirational suicide preventer in the UK, and he said to me, Neil, there's lots of theories and there's lots of psychoanalysis and so on, and it's all good, everything's good, but if I ever think to myself, if I see someone in distress, the first two questions I ask myself are, what is my purpose, what is my value? So what is the purpose of that person? What is their value? And of course, the issue is, have they lost either their purpose, their value, or both? And actually, it was so powerful. And I want to bear with me. I'll maybe come back to that. But as you heard there, I'm 35 years a teacher. That's my background. I was a teacher 35 years, still teach really a bit, but I'm a headmaster really now. 20 years as a school principal in the UK. I led a school to become one of the world's top 100 schools, and we now have 2 schools in China, a school in Malaysia. I have been approached to open a school in India, but that's my background. And I went into education because I met a beautiful girl when she was at university, and she said she was going to be a teacher. So as a man, I thought, well, hey, I didn't have any imagination, I'll follow the beautiful girl. And that's what happened, and 35 years later, here I am. But I love education, because I think in education what we do is we talk to a person's heart. If you talk to a child's heart, you get to their minds eventually. But if you talk to their minds, you never get anywhere near their heart. That's kind of simple. So talk to the heart, and that's the way I loved to lead the school I led. And I felt whenever I appointed a teacher, that's what I looked for, the teacher who talked to a child's heart and spirit, and then everything else could follow. And it was a few years ago, it must have been about 2010, I was interviewing for a mathematics teacher. Now, mathematics teachers are not easy to find. Good mathematics teachers very difficult to find. And I met a man who had a brilliant degree and had so much energy. And I remember I interviewed quite a lot of people that day, and I just thought, I hope he takes the job. I hope he takes the job. I offered him more money than I should have done because I wanted him to take the job. He took the job. And it was transformational in the school. You know, the children loved him. When he wasn't teaching mathematics, he'd be out running with them or sharing time with them. He brought his then wife, and they subsequently had children at the school. And I didn't mention to you that it was a boarding school. My background's in international education, so virtually all of the children at the school were from Asia, from Southeast Asia, South Asia, and from different parts of the world, but those were the two big demographics. And I don't remember what year it was. I think just before the pandemic. We often, don't we, talk about pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. I think it was just before the pandemic. My wife and I were at home in the school area, and we had your parents, didn't we, staying with us. And there was a knock on the door on a Sunday. I think it was a Sunday. Might have been Saturday. It was a Saturday. That's slightly important. And it was this man's wife. And she said, "Neil, you've got to come now. You've got to come now." And she handed me her phone. And she left me, and she said, "You need to talk to the person on the phone." And she went into our house with her children, 2 children. And I had to walk about 200 yards, 100 yards maybe to their house. And I realised that on the phone was an ambulance service. The ambulance service was on the phone. And they were saying, talking me through, "We think something's happened, you need to go to the house, you need to find out what's going on." And, you're trying to process, you're trying to think what is going on. I'm trying to act as, I've suddenly had to become the principal. But equally, I was still Neil, sitting at home with my family. Equally, I'm the friend of these people, certainly the friendly, the professional friend. And I let myself into the house. Well, the door was open, thinking about it. I'm just trying to think it through. The door was open, and I went into the house. And forgive me, but I went round the corner, and there were his legs hanging. I didn't see the rest of him at that point. And they said, "You must get the body down. You give him CPR. Give him CPR, because the ambulance is still 7 minutes away." So for the next, I did what I could do. You do what you can do. I didn't think it was going to do any good, because you can see what you can see. And it didn't. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later, and they came in and took over, and they did their best and fairly quickly declared that he was dead. Now that in itself, of course, is an experience, but it's then, and the bit that is often we don't see, and I'd never seen before, was what happened next. Because it was, and I talk about this now, it's the human impacts, the very obvious human impacts. I had to go back to my house and see his family and tell them what had happened. We then, as a community, because of course I was also head of a community of many, hundreds of children, we had 300 staff. You've got to think, how do we talk about this? How do we say this? And of course, you've got to get your leadership together. You talk about the impact via the leadership. But I had to get our whole community together and talk about it with the children the next day. And of course, appropriately, talk about illness. Died as a result of a sudden illness, I think was the phrase I came up with. I could think of no other phrase. It felt the most honest. And so it went on. Later in the week, I spent time with his wife, wanted to talk again. And she wanted to know absolutely every detail of everything that I had seen. And that was an extraordinary thing. She needed to process. And so it went on. At that meeting, she told me that she was pregnant with their third child. And so it went on, and so it went on, and so it went on. And it is the ripple after ripple after ripple after ripple that goes out from one death of I must stress to you, the most extraordinary human being. The most extraordinary, I was so happy to have him with us. And I don't know that there was an answer. I'm not standing here with answers. But what I'm absolutely sure about is on that day, in that moment, he had lost his value and lost his purpose. There is, of course, no logic or rationality to that, because I've just described that he was an incredible person who had who had what we as probably sitting here, hopefully in a good place, hopefully would say rationally, he had things to live for. But in that moment, there was nothing. He had lost those things. But what I would say to you is the conversation that you have at any time when you are volunteering is of enormous value, because what is to say that if he could have spoken to someone in that 5 minute, could have been as short as that, 5 minute desperate moment, when whatever was, when he needed to stop the pain, because I think that's the best explanation I can find for why people take this action, to stop the pain. But the conversations that we have as befrienders, that you give, the love that you give, the listening that you give, is of enormous value, because the ripples don't stop. The ripples, it'll live with that community. I'm part of the community, but there are others who still talk about it a decade later, and it'll carry on until those memories are gone. So, forgive me sharing something so visceral and difficult, but I hope it also affirms to you the value of the work that you are doing and the love that you are giving. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your valuable speech.